Hi! So today is my day 4 of my vulnerability video diary series, and today's topic is the sexual abuse that I endured as a child. I believe I was 11, so don't quote me on that. I think it was going on my 12th birthday when I told my mom about it. I only remember a handful of the encounters because that's all my memory will surface. And I know there may be some more and they're just suppressed, so but this is what happens to our memories if they're difficult to bear. So it happened during an age where sexuality was already confusing enough. My mom one day, she asked me if anyone was touching me. It was just like a totally random question, and like we were just together hanging out, and she asked me, and I said yes. And well, how she worded it was it anyone touching me? And I said, what do you mean? And then she said, in your lady parts. So, and I told her yes. And she asked who, and then I told her who. So that was the day that I had told her. And like her initial response, I think it was mostly shock. She didn't believe me right away because of that shock, but once she took a few breaths and just realized, she asked a few questions, and I answered them honestly, and then she knew. What's going on out there? I learned early on the motives of men, and this is what was confusing for me as a female living in a world full of men. I always felt threatened. Afterwards, after the abuse had happened. I always felt threatened just by the presence of men because I knew their end game, what they wanted. And even as a teenager, I knew, and it was still hard. So even when I grew up and was well aware of everything, it was still hard. I had night terrors, and my night terrors, what they were about was I was being chased by my abuser, and from I was either crawling or running, whatever the situation was, I was trying to get away, and he was on my ankles, or he was right behind me, and I couldn't ever just get free of him. And that's what my night terrors consisted of, from what I remember. So, and I had this sort of night terror even as I grew up and became an adult. When I married, when I had a kid, anytime that I had my emotions from this event, from these encounters as a child, my emotions got stirred up. These were the sort of night terrors that I would have, was being chased and never really being free of it, never being free of him or the fear of him. So this was what I had to deal with. And when I was a kid, I would always wake up crying and my mom would comfort me. But yeah, The reason why I also had the night terrors is because one of the things that he had told me, or I don't know how to word that, but he had promised, or he told me that when I had become the age, he would take me camping one-on-one, and he would use that time to deflower me. And that's what I was scared of. I was scared of that day coming, and I was always running in my night terrors. So one of the other issues that I had growing up was anyone with the name of my abuser. It left a bad taste in my mouth, and just the name itself, like I would become emotional, and I would have flashbacks because of the name. So even just the name brought fear. And because I knew the motives of men, and I felt threatened, I didn't talk to men. I didn't talk to guys for a long time. I didn't. And it wasn't until my freshman year I actually started talking freely and talking about my feelings. My mom had noticed that, or maybe it was the school, I'm not even sure which one it was, but had noticed that I had a problem with expressing my feelings, and then I was put into a class where I was able to express myself. It wasn't really even a class like that. I don't know why they said that, but it wasn't a class that actually helped me. It was just like a study hall. I don't know. But yeah, I don't remember the school actually helping me express my feelings or my thoughts. So it wasn't even until my first marriage when I started talking about what had happened to me, like seriously talking about it. Because I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed because it had happened to me, and that I was the victim, and I didn't think it was something that children endured, children went through. And I thought it was one of those things that, you keep it hush-hush. I didn't want people to talk about me. I didn't want people to say negative things. I didn't want people to point and say, oh, she's a victim. So for a long time, I didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about any of it. One of the bigger things is when I was married, when we had our kid, we discussed names and we discussed nicknames, and one of the nicknames that I was adamant about using was TJ, the nickname TJ, and ended up being that is what I called him. That's what we had agreed on, and that was the name that I had picked out specifically. And when he was around 1 year old, I was reading a book by a trusted author, so I didn't read the back of the book because I knew it was going to be amazing. And I got a few chapters into this mystery book, this mystery novel, and in this chapter, it started off in the mind of the killer, and it went through the killer sexually abusing children around the age of 10, and then afterwards he would murder them. So when I got to this point, when I figured out like what was really going on, I put the book down, and I was left in horror, and my mind began to race, and I started to have flashbacks, and all of these thoughts just came crashing around, and my mind wouldn't stop. And I went on the computer really quick, I went to my computer and pulled up Google, and I started to search for him. because my thoughts were like, where is he? Is he gonna find me? Will he know where I'm at? Is he gonna, finish the job? You know what I mean? Or do what he promised, and even though I was married and had a kid and I lived in Germany at the time, but I was still scared, and my thoughts would just kind of go crazy. And what happened was I found his record online because he's an offender, and it's public and he has to register. So I found his record in 2 different states, and when I was doing my researching, because that's what I like to do is research, I was reading through his record, and I spotted his alias, and there was a list of nicknames, and the one that stood out on both of the records, because they were the same, was the nickname DJ. And when I saw this, this is what set me over the edge. I was so upset because I had named my son after the man or the person that I feared the most in the world, after the person that had hurt me the most. And I just became distraught. And just to give a little bit of information here, he had gone on the run, and the police were searching for him for several years, which I'm not even really sure how long. We didn't keep up with it. But he ended up being on America's Most Wanted, the list, and they had even put it up on the commercials. Man, I remember seeing it, and I don't know what year it was, but it was I thought it was in 2007, 2008. I'm not sure. It's probably about 2007. But I remember seeing it up online. Oh, it's hot in here. And that stirred up some emotion that day as well. But anyways, the point is fear gets the best of us, and your mind will just keep going if you allow it to, and it'll go through all the what ifs, just scaring you even more when you have that initial fear. So what had happened was I had called my husband, my previous husband now, and I told him about what happened, and he took me into a medical clinic to talk to someone, but they weren't able to get me in for 2 weeks because I wasn't the military member. So I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't get the help that I needed. So we had agreed on the ride home that we would rip the book up and we would burn it, and that would make me feel better. And it did for a little bit. I mean, on the surface, it's like sweeping, dirt underneath the rug. It helped, for a little bit, but the pain was still there. And what I ended up doing was what helped a little bit more was I set up email alerts for whenever my abuser had moved or done anything like that. So I would get that email, and that reassured me, so I didn't have to keep searching and looking. So So yeah, so that's it on that. And there was this other time, it was right around the same time that I had that issue, but I had flown back to the States for a visit, and I remember I was on base with my family, and I saw a man who looked identical to my abuser, and he was the younger version, because I know it had been a few years, but I saw him. We were walking in this like I think it's a kind of like a PX maybe for Army. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But once I spotted him, and I saw that that was him, or it looked like him. I just stood there in horror, and I just kept my eyes on him, and I just watched him, and like my face just got white, like I had seen a ghost. And this guy, he was walking towards me, and he saw at some point that I was watching him, because when we had passed each other, I had turned to watch him still, and he had turned, and then he had waved at me, and then he went on his way. So I was convinced that this was him. He knew it was me because he waved at me, and because he was looking back too. So I became frantic. I was so upset. I went to the nearest store, and the only thing that had calmed me down was the family member was in the military, and he told me that offenders are not allowed to be on base. So it couldn't have been him. And then that's what had calmed me, like that was fine. All right, I understand. That makes sense. That's a good thing. And then I still had all those emotions flowing through me, that when we got back to the car, I just started writing. And I started like writing poems and just writing down my words, because I like to write. I grew up writing in a diary, and so that's what I started doing. And I started writing about how I was watching my ghost from my past wave at me, and how my ghost was purposefully antagonizing me. But come to find out, this sort of fear of the idea of someone, the enemy has a foothold into controlling your emotions. And he did control my emotions, the enemy. So fast forward a few years, just a few months back, I was watching a video of a man who was telling a story on those note cards. And so we were, I was reading, and he wasn't speaking, but he was telling a story, and there was just something so profound about his story and his boldness that I loved it. I loved the boldness and his honesty and his the transparency, that strength to be able to be a voice and explain, I guess, just tell your story, and then what happened afterwards, and how it's this fear of what happened to you, the pain that it caused, and how we allow ourselves to get into bad situations because it's our way of coping, because we don't know any better, or sometimes we'll like rebel against it, we'll rebel against what happened to us. And and then how the pain just kind of grows over the years, and it doesn't go away. So it just manifests in like a different way. And he had even told his audience that he left his family and he left his daughter because of the pain just was too unbearable with what happened to him. And he was on drugs, he was an alcoholic, and he was doing some pretty horrible stuff. And it's because he was so overwhelmed with the pain of what happened. And then that sort of redemption story, he told that as well. And that's authentic, that's profound, to be able to explain what happened to you as a child, and then the choices that you made afterwards, and the pain that it caused, and then just to be able to admit something like that, and then also to be done with it, to show that testimony, and then explain that redemption part of it. So I thought there was something amazing in that. And this is the reason why I wanted to do a video, and I wanted to do a video series or do something. I just wanted to tell my story, and I knew that if I were just to kind of talk, I tried one day. It ended up being like an hour and 30 minutes, and I didn't even get my whole story, so it was kind of hard still, and didn't think anyone would even watch it. So this was the better choice, was just, put it in little videos, so that way you can get more out of it. So I wanted to tell my story because I know that God wants me to be bold, and I know that He has this new season for me spiritually, and He has been wanting me to speak up for a while about this, and I had been stubborn. I wasn't quite ready yet. I didn't know how. I had doubts, I'd questioned it, and I didn't know the best way to go about it. And little by little, I had talked to the ladies in my Bible study, and it just kind of grew into this situation. So, but I didn't want to see other people I didn't want to see others fall into Satan's lies like I had, and continuing that state of being the victim, and you're no longer the victim anymore, and you continue this sort of mind frame, and it just plagues you. It plagues your relationships later, and your parenting. It plagues your decisions. It kind of controls every aspect of your life, and it embeds itself as a personality trait. It does, now you're welcoming it. You're welcoming, that victim card. You want to throw it out at any chance. And I can only say this because I've done it myself. So, speaking from experience on this, I don't want to see other people go through this sort of cycle, because it isn't healthy, and nor is it a part of God's divine plan for each and every one of His children. So, and when you're this much in pain with something that happened in your past, and you use things to try and help you with healing or to get over it, or you seek different roads to fill that void. I mean, every victim has done that. So, and I'm gonna explain in another video about one of the ways that I used to find my voice, and then also to be a rebel. So that was one of my ways that I used as like a coping mechanism, a coping way to cope with it all. And it worked for a little bit, and then it just kind of died out. But it hurts you more than anything if you can't forgive, and if you can't heal fully. And I don't want you to think that there's some way to be healed out there. There's some simple trick out in the world, and then realize that it didn't help you, and then fall back into Satan's lies again, and here you are in a cycle again. And that's why I wanted to tell my testimony and explain to you what helped for me, and the only reason why it had helped is because God's strength and His almighty power, there's something about it. There's something remarkable and incredible about the way that He heals us if we just rely on Him, if we just give it all up to Him and release it all. And there's different ways that you can do this. You can speak it out, you can write it out. I did both. I mostly wrote it out, and I spoke it out for God to take it from me. But writing out all those painful memories is what had helped me to overcome it. And then also just to speak it out for forgiveness, because I had gone through my forgiveness stage, where I wanted to be done with everything from my past, and then, have Christ turn that new leaf for me. So I had tediously gone through every situation throughout my life, and I wrote about it. I interviewed family and friends, and I sought forgiveness from them, and I gave forgiveness for whatever they had done to me, and I, encouraged them, and I showed my love. And this was my way of turning over that new leaf, and being done with the past. But one of the things is, when it came to my my abuser, the sexual abuse, I had forgiven him 3 years ago when I started my forgiveness stage, and I was no longer in pain from it because God had taken that burden from me. So I had been praying for years because I knew that with the work that I had done to forgive some very important people in my life for things that they had done to me, I knew that the release was more important for them than it was for me to speak it out. So I knew that it was important for others than it was for me, because it was as if I was releasing someone of their debt towards me. So I knew that I needed to seek out my abuser one day, and that's what I had prayed about, was being able to get in contact with him and speak to him personally and forgive him. I knew that was important and and that was on my heart for the past few years. Like, but I didn't know how I was going to do it, what I was going to do. So I kind of just let things play out on its own, and I, continued to grow, and I got involved with my church and everything. And so what happened was, one day a few months back, I looked for my abuser on Facebook, and I noticed that he had a Facebook. So what I ended up doing was, just to keep my real life separate, I wanted to protect myself just in case. I didn't know what I was walking into, so I created a fake Facebook account, and I befriended him, and I created, friends, and I put photos up that didn't show my face, inspirational stuff, Bible scripture, and I put up creating this facade, I guess, of some of the things that I do here on my real Facebook account, but I just showed this, but not my real life. And when he accepted my request, that day I took initiative on looking through all of his information and checking to see if he was a good person, and just wanting to know about his character. And I had put like a fake birthday up, and then like a month later he wished me happy birthday, so that opened up communication, and I said thank you to him. And what it was is, it was just creating this fake Facebook account. It was like a test to see if I was able to handle it. So when I forgot about it, it told me that I was ready. Like, there was something was going to happen, and I did. I forgot about him and the account, and there wasn't any sort of emotional attachment whatsoever from faking the account and all of that. So I knew that something was going to happen, and I had been praying about it. I didn't let it up, and I just waited for God, and I prayed to him about the words that he could help me to use to be able to forgive him, and to work through me, to show him Christ in me, because something like this is impossible living in the world. It's impossible, this sort of forgiveness and this sort of love. So that I knew that only God can help me with this, and I wanted him to know that. So all of a sudden one day, right before I left for Hawaii, I had this like overwhelming peace, excitement, and I had this what is it called? Mission. I had this mission. Like, I had been told what to do, and what I had been doing the last few months is listening to that intuition, the Spirit guiding me. So I had been listening to it instead of being afraid and being, or doubting that Spirit, or telling it no, because every time you say no, or you decide not to take action upon it, then you are stopping a situation that could actually be your moment of growth that draws you closer to Christ. So I had been learning to take this risk, to listen to it, and to have peace during that, and then to pray about it and make sure that it's right. And every time, it never failed me. So with this, I stood right up. I was sitting next to my husband, and then all of a sudden I had this thought, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I haven't checked on that account in a long time. All of a sudden, I stood up, and I just knew this was the time to write him a message. And bam, it just came right out of my fingertips, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I hit send, and he read it. I don't think he understood it because of the way that it worded. It could have been like scam or something. He might have, because towards the end I said who I was, but I just said, and if you couldn't tell, this is Valerie. But I didn't give any personal information or information about like what had happened in the past. I didn't bring up any of that. So I can see how it could have, been a little confusing. And I told him to take his time on responding, because I know that it's difficult when something like this has sprung up. And he said something like, "Yes, ma'am," and "Thank you." And then, that was it. And he didn't respond for weeks. And I kept looking to see if he responded, and nothing. And then I got back from Hawaii like a week, less than a week after. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I posted something on Facebook about it, but all of a sudden I had this feeling again that I needed to explain who I was, because that was what it was. He didn't know who I was exactly, because my fake account had a fake name. So I explained who I was, and I gave greater detail. I told him who my mom was and where I grew up and stuff like that. And then I even sent like a photo of myself during that time, so that he, just in case that, he knew there was some sort of proof that I'm not making up who I am. And then all of a sudden the conversation just took off. And before I knew it, he had asked, please forgive me. And then I like redirect him, and I said, just read the original message, and then it explains it all, that I already did this. I did this, and I don't want you I didn't want you to think that I didn't. So, and I guess he read it, and he understood, and then, we continued talking, and then before I knew it, we started communicating, and he wanted, how do I word this, man? To communicate through phone. And this was the moment where I kind of knew that it needed to be done, because writing it is different, but hearing it, or even just reading it, is different, but hearing it and saying it is a whole new ball game, however that saying goes. But I knew that I needed to tell him, and I was pretty sure that he would ask again to forgive him. So, and he did when we talked on the phone. But he needed to hear it, and I needed to be able to say it too. And we talked for a few minutes, and then that was it. But it's amazing to be able to say that I officially have no fear because of God. I can say that this sort of fear that I had in the past no longer cripples me, because every moment when I was talking with him. I was happy. I was happy. I was excited. And I knew that that peace that I got was from Christ, that I knew that this was the right thing to do. And it needed to be done. So, I mean, it's official. You know, we can get over our childhood traumas and we can get healing. So, I just want you guys all to know that you can be healed, and the promises that are in the Bible, they're true. They're true. If you start this relationship and you just keep at it, and you build this relationship, and you build this trust, and you plug in, because community is important in your growth. You will grow spiritually. It's bound to happen. So I want to challenge you guys. That find a way, whether it's to speaking it out, praying to God, but always pray, yes, always pray that out, speak it to Him in some way, or write it down and then pray it out. Because sometimes it's a little bit easier to write down your thoughts and then speak it out. Or write it down and ask God to help you with all of that paper, whatever you wrote on that paper, to give it up. And just do whatever you can, but just remember that He'll take it from you if you give it to Him. He will bear that burden, and then you'll no longer have to carry that burden. That's what happens when you give your life over to Christ. So it's a promise, and you have to believe in this promise. You have to trust Him with taking it all too. So I knew there was something else I was gonna say. But anyways, I think that's about it. I'm at 42 minutes. I need to quit now. So I challenge you to do that. That's right. So I challenge you to go through your forgiveness phase if you haven't already done it, and start living for Christ. Go to church. If you miss church, always stay connected. You know, go on the app if they have an app that the church does, and still continue to watch the service. And I also want to challenge you, this is the biggest part, is to get connected and go to a Bible study, and a men's or women's Bible study, or a small group, and plug in any other way that you can. Like, they'll have workshops, conferences, and seminars. Take advantage of all of these events and feed your soul, because once you start to get hungry. You start to get hungry for more, for healing, for all of it. His love, His grace, His mercy, His compassion. You get hungry for all of what He has for you, because you start to hear all of these promises. You start to hear how amazing He is, and you start to realize His attributes, and you want them all, because He's going to share it with us. He's going to share it. He's going to teach us how to be more like Him. And plug yourself in. That's the only way that you can seriously get started, is if you plug yourself in and grow with a group. When I joined my women's Bible study, I started to open up. I found my voice. I was in a safe area. I felt so comfortable with these beautiful ladies. And I started talking, and they accepted me, and they comforted me, and they encouraged me. And this is where it started. And I had opened up a few times about things in my past, and then, I developed some friends, and I wanted more. I wanted to be able to tell my testimony and spread how God works. And I know that that's important to hear about, because sharing your testimony is important for others to hear about. So I knew that that's what God was wanting me to do. So I guess at this point, I don't want to keep you guys too long. It's about 45 minutes already. Stay tuned to my other videos. I think this is the longest one. It's the toughest one. But yeah, you can overcome your fears. You can overcome your past. So just trust God, and that's it. Love you guys. Good night.